Hello, good evening, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. It is January the 27th, 2021. I am your host, Mark Scheig. I hope you had a really wonderful week. Lots of hockey, a little bit of normalcy coming back into our lives. So it's just really good to have full out hockey for over the next 100 days straight here. So glad you're taking some time to join us tonight. Got a wonderful show planned for you. So sorry we're a little bit late here, starting at about 10 after 8. But we're going to have our Montreal Canadiens panel on tonight. We're going to talk about why they're off to such a really good start. And then eventually, our hope is to have the great Craig Morgan, who covers the Arizona Coyotes for Arizona Coyotes Insider, his new website, will hopefully join us within the hour at some point. But we're going to start with the panel tonight because there's just a lot of good stuff going on in Montreal, and we really need to get to the bottom of this. So let's introduce the panel. So we have our new credentialed writer, Ryan Szporer, back with us. Hello, Ryan. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks. And then Melissa Boyd is back with us. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. And Stephen Michaud joins us tonight. Hello, Stephen. How's life in BC?
Oh, it's pretty good. Thanks, Mark.
Good. Excellent. Well, thanks for the time tonight, guys. And yeah, no regulation losses for the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, think of a dream start. This has to be it, given expectations, new players. Maybe we weren't sure what to expect, but it seems like everything's working so far. So, Ryan, just start with you right off the bat. What is the biggest reason that these Canadians are off to such a hot start?
I think you kind of alluded to it, just the new additions, which have led to a great amount of depth, more depth than I've personally seen in maybe my lifetime, which is I'm kind of getting up there. So that's a lot of depth. Yeah, I have to say that they have the ability to roll three, maybe even four lines, the way that fourth line is going with Paul Byron, Jake Evans, and Arturi Lehkonen. They're doing very well offensively, and they've also got the depth on the back end, especially with the addition of rookie Alexander Romanov. So I feel as though they're solid for all intents and purposes, top to bottom. The real only weak point statistically has been in net, but I think Carey Price's stats will normalize over time, and everything should be copacetic on that front. I'm not worried.
Melissa, why such a hot start from your point of view?
I think definitely along the same lines as Ryan, but I think also what I've noticed, at least in what the players and the coaches have been saying in the media, and Mark Bergevin as well, I think it's there. You can tell that the attitude has changed. There's been an attitude switch since last season and past seasons. I think they really believe that they're good. They know, actually, I should say they know that they're good, and they're playing like it. They're playing like they have something to accomplish this season. To me, that's the biggest thing I've noticed. It's no longer like the discourse is no longer, oh, well, we hope we're going to get into the playoffs. Oh, well, we hope this goes well. It's no, we're making the playoffs, and we want to go deep and make a run at this. So for me, I think that's the biggest reason why they're doing so well.
Interesting. Stephen, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree with both Ryan and Melissa. But in addition to that, I give the coaching staff a lot of credit for being able to take all these new additions and insert them and implement them into the system very effectively. I know that for one, it's difficult to insert that many people and just expect that everything will work out. So I think there might be a little bit of luck on their side as well, just how smoothly everything's gone. I think there's a little bit of a dip coming, but generally speaking, I think it's a lot of credit to the coaching staff and their attention to detail.
Absolutely. And Melissa, I'll ask you a follow-up question since you brought up the whole everybody's bought in.
Yeah.
How much of this is on Claude Julien?
Yeah, actually, that's a great point that Stephen brought up. I think actually he hasn't been getting enough credit so far. I think, and it's about continuity as well. The lines and the D pairings have basically stayed the same since the first day of training camp. Like nothing has changed. Every day it's the same thing. So he's giving them the chance to really gel together. And I think also the way the pieces fit together really works this year. So, for example, Josh Anderson is a perfect complement to Nick Suzuki and Jonathan Drouin. Everybody anticipated that this would be a good trio, and they have been. Same goes, and they already had the top line, Dano, Gallagher, and Tatar that were kind of the one line we knew we could count on. But yeah, I think he deserves a ton of credit, and just the way that and for once he's actually he actually did what we hoped he would do, because sometimes you throw out lines and you're like, no, that's not going to work. But from the first day of training camp, I remember the first day I was like, that's exactly what I would have done. Like, that's how I would have iced it to start. Even though I think there will be changes, obviously, as the season goes. I think Romanov's going to go up in the lineup and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of the anti-Columbus Blue Jackets, the John Tortorella approach. I think he's changed lines every game. Yeah. And here we are, you guys are saying, she's saying that Claude Julien has basically been consistent, and that continuity is just so important. I mean, Ryan, how long has it been since you've seen this kind of continuity in and around the Canadiens?
Well, I mean, again, let's call a spade a spade. There hasn't been any changes to the lineup because there hasn't been a need to change the lineup. Julien has a tendency to go with what works, and right now it's working. So I suspect if the Canadiens do lose, he'll at least consider making a change. It depends on how bad they lose, but yeah, I'm fairly confident that this is going to stay as is for all intents and purposes. Maybe a few line moves here and there, but yeah. Sure. To answer your question, I can't recall. I'm sure there have been streaks of winning streaks in the past where things have stayed the same, but I wrote an article a few days ago saying that there's this feeling about surrounding the Canadiens that I personally have never been witness to. Maybe back in 2007, 2008, when they won the Northeast Division title in the regular season, and they had a stacked lineup then. That was back when Kovalev scored 84 points, which is, like I wrote in the piece, a rarity for the Canadiens to see a point per game score. So even then, that team was really only two lines. This one is 3-4 lines deep, and I really believe that I'm going to stop short from saying that this is going to be a historical season, but they definitely have the potential to do a lot of damage.
So, Stephen, what's been the biggest surprise for you in the early going? Obviously, there'd be plenty of pleasant surprises to pick from, but what stood out to you?
Actually, it's, I think, the play of Kotkaniemi. I know that in the bubble he did make bigger difference than he had made in the previous season, or that earlier in that season, because he only played 36 games and he had some injury problems and he was sent down. And yeah, when we saw him in the bubble, he had clearly made some improvements to his skating. But I didn't think he was going to have made an even bigger jump to this point. You can see the difference between his skating and his puck skills now compared to the bubble, and it's quite a large jump. And his forechecking has been very, very good the last few games. And yeah, I just think that he's made a bigger improvement than I would have imagined from just the summer to now. So that would be the biggest surprise for me so far.
What do you think, Ryan? Surprise?
The biggest surprise to me, and this goes back to what Millis was saying about, the sense that this team can go for it, knows that they are good and knows that they can go for it, is Bergevin's willingness to keep this team together, as opposed to having to trade someone like Paul Byron or whomever to, give them more cap space, because that was a sentiment heading into this season, that someone would have to go, whether it was, Byron or Kulak. My choice would have been Kulak on the back end, just because of the influx of talent there, especially Romanov. But Bergevin has, with the addition of the taxi squad, he's found a way to keep these, 4 lines, these 3 pairings. Like, this is a solid team top to bottom, and I feel as though Bergevin acknowledges that he doesn't want to mess with, a recipe for success.
And Melissa, what do you think?
I think the biggest surprise for me has been, like we've said before, I think is just how well and how quickly the new players have fit in these unusual circumstances. Every one of them has made an impact and has contributed to the team's success in different ways, obviously, but it's really like, it almost feels like they've been there for years already. It's hard to believe that they've only each played 6 games, and Jake Allen just came in. He's won 2 games, played excellent. Even Joel Edmondson, maybe not on the score sheet, and he had a tough first game in Toronto, but even him, he's contributing in his own ways. And so I think that's the big difference. And I was thinking too this week, like, given that the home opener is tomorrow, it's really too bad actually that there's going to be no fans at this game, because I think like the roof would be blown off the place after the start they've had, and also for them to be able to welcome all these new guys on the team and sort of thank them for their efforts so far. So but yeah, that's, to me, that's what's been the most surprising, is seeing how well they fit in.
All right, so it's about 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, fan. Just want to jump in. This is the Hockey Writers Live. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and we're talking with our Montreal Canadiens panel. In the next couple of minutes, my understanding is Craig Morgan from Arizona Coyotes Insider is going to join us. So what will happen is whenever he's ready, we're going to get him on. We'll put him on screen. We'll do the interview with him, and then we'll come back to the Canadiens panel after that. So right now we're going to keep going with Montreal here for a couple more minutes until Craig is ready. Then we'll have that interview, and then we'll come back to the Montreal panel. So we appreciate you sticking with us. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you never miss a darn thing. And Melissa, while we wait for Craig here, you wrote a great piece on Jeff Petrie today, and I just wanted to get your take on that. Just what was that about, and what is it about him that's really stood out to you here in the early going?
Well, thanks for that plug. I appreciate it. I just, I think he's probably one of the most underestimated players in the whole league. And even, I think even us, we don't appreciate him as much as we should, even though he's been playing on the team for 6 years now. I think he's just this modern day defenseman that is so valuable in today's NHL. He does, he's fast, he reads plays really well. He anticipates, and he's just the way I see it is every game, I say to myself, wow, that was a nice play by Jeff Petrie. And it's like these subtle things that he does. And, I was watching him sort of go up against Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid against Edmonton last week. And, the way he was covering them and defending them, it's really impressive. And I think he's kind of a bit overshadowed by Shea Weber, but he's really outstanding.
Good stuff. And well, we're going to come back to you guys here after we're done with Craig. So Ryan, Melissa, Stephen, thank you for your time so far. We will see you in a little bit.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're going to transition here. Take Stephen, Melissa, and Ryan off for now, but they will be back. Our wonderful Montreal Canadiens panel. Did a great job writing for us. But joining us now from apparently snowy valley, Craig Morgan. Hello.
What's up, guys?
How's it going? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I apologize for a little bit of a delay. It's been one of those days.
I can totally imagine, when that random call comes in and you have to take it, been there, done that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So is it snowing down your way? Is that rumor true?
It's not actually snowing in Phoenix or in the valley, but in the surrounding areas. The valley is really is basically ringed by mountains on all sides. It's a huge valley, but there are mountains all around, and snow fell to the east of us, to the north of us, to the west of us. So it's pretty cool actually driving on the freeways, because we don't see much snow down here, as you can imagine.
It's a sign of 2021. Is that a sign of things to come?
Seriously, I don't know what to think of it.
Yeah, we'll see. But just Craig, how are you doing with everything? How's life treating you?
It's been an interesting year, obviously, but this new venture is going very well. I have to say it's exceeded all expectations. So the website, it's in a really good place. I've got a lot of subscribers. It's still growing, and it would certainly obviously help if the Coyotes did something. It's been a while since they did something, but we'll see. I'm in a good place. So thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Arizona Coyotes insider. And he was with the Athletic. Now he's on his new venture. So fans, I would highly encourage you, if you get the opportunity, if you really want to follow this team, because even though they might be in a little bit of a downhill right now, there's always something interesting going on, whether it comes to Oliver Ekman-Larsson, some of the players on the team, obviously transitioning general managers. There's something going on in the desert. Craig is your man. So make sure that you subscribe to his website if given the chance. azcoyotesinsider.com. Is that
That's
sound
correct.
right?
Yep.
Perfect. So how are you adjusting to the virtual, the Zoom life? Has it been much different for you in terms of being a hockey writer?
Yeah, it has. Let's face it. This is a business about relationships. Those talks, and I don't travel either anymore, and I don't think most writers are traveling. So when you're afforded those opportunities, you have the conversation, in a hotel lobby, or when you're on the road, they don't have all the family things that they have to worry about getting home to, so they can take more time. I just really think that helps you become a better reporter and writer. It helps you develop rapport with the players, with the coaches, with the managers, and all of that is taken away right now. There's no face-to-face contact, so it definitely makes it more of a challenge to do your job.
Yeah, and you use your phone. You got sometimes just have to be really flexible. And the fact that we're still able to do this during a pandemic, though, I mean, even any little bit of normalcy, I think, is just helpful for everybody, right?
Yeah, no question. I do believe in that. You've heard it probably said in a number of sports, but I do think that having sports around gives people a little sense of normalcy, some sort of escape, at least from all the craziness occurring in our country right now.
And that's interesting too, since you're in the market down there in Glendale, they are one of the markets right now that have fans. So in that sense, there is some normalcy for them. So I just wanted to ask you, Craig, how is that situation with fans going? Does it seem to be working as they intended?
I think so. Most of the fans that I've spoken to have said that they're really impressed with how the Coyotes are handling things in terms of safety precautions, spacing, all of it. They've been very impressed. Now, when you see the arena, obviously it looks mostly empty still. It's a smattering of fans just spread out around the lower bowl and the suites. They're actually renting mini suites for up to 4 people. So they're considerably distanced from one another. And then with all the health checks, so far it seems to be going all right. And then they've closed off the entire upper bowl, and then the media are above them in the press box, and that's even limited right now. They're not allowing all media in, so it seems to be working well so far. We just don't know enough about this, about COVID yet, to know if this is a danger, but right now it seems okay.
Yeah, and it's encouraging too. The Blues announced that they've done so well with their protocols. They're going to allow 1,400 fans. Some places already have fans, so I think we're slowly, maybe being optimistic, starting to see some good things coming here, and hopefully more places will be able to allow some fans to come in. And as they find out more information, we can slowly get back to that place of normalcy where, maybe someday we'll get back to a full arena again, the way it should be.
Yeah, as they roll out the vaccine, I think we get closer and closer to that reality, but it's probably still 3 months away. I don't know. Maybe we'll have it for the postseason. We'll see.
We'll see. Exactly right. Craig Morgan joining us here talking about the Arizona Coyotes. And on the ice, I see they got a heaping helping of John Gibson last night. So from your point of view, I mean, obviously he's off to a great start. But boy, the Coyotes, I tell you what, against Anaheim, that division outside of the top 3 seems like that 4th spot can be up for grabs. And I feel like that's a game that the Coyotes at home should probably win. Is that the way that you saw it last night?
Absolutely. I looked at that as one. Look, they had a tough early schedule in that they had to play 4 straight against Vegas. That is a legitimate cup contender and a team that they don't match up well against. It's a heavy team that gives them fits. Even so, they lost that last game 1-0 on what I think was a blown icing call. So that game probably should have gone to overtime, and they should have had at least a point. But then you turn around off the frustration of that game, and you figure they're going to come out with a really strong effort in that game against Anaheim. And while they had possession time, they had a lot of ozone time. I didn't like their shot selection or their shot quality. I thought Gibson was very good, but I didn't think he was tested all that much. I was a little surprised by their performance. And now, even if they win this last game against Anaheim before they go out on an 8-game road trip, they're going to be under 500 when they hit the road. And that creates a really difficult situation for them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting to see where they go. And you brought up, that was the next thing I was going to talk to you about, that end of the Vegas game, that blown icing call. I think it was you that mentioned, is it time to review all goals, or maybe even allow more situations to be reviewable? Just Is that something that we should be going toward in the league, or what's your take on that, Craig?
My take is there should at least be discussion on it. I am not a huge fan of video replay because it does slow the pace of the game. I think it kills the flow often. We've seen that happen in the NFL. But I am a big proponent of getting calls right. I know some people think, oh, human error is part of the beauty of the game. Well, I think human error when it comes to players and coaches is part of the game. I don't think it should be a part of the game when it comes to officiating. So at least they should have that discussion. Maybe it's not review every goal, although I think that could be one solution. The NFL reviews every scoring play right now, and most of them are so cut and dry that you can probably do it in the time that the teams are lining up for the faceoff. But maybe that's something that you consider. Maybe you give the coach more discretion with the challenge so that they can challenge for icing as well. Like I said, I just think I think the GM should get together and discuss that and see how they feel about it, because you hate to see plays like that. Look, I know Vegas fans don't agree with me, but I watched a reverse angle of that. I saw the release of Alex Tuck's dump in. He was behind the red line. And even though they waved it off, they shouldn't have waved it off. That should have been icing by every step of the rule.
And especially this year, if it's a close playoff race or just anywhere in the standings, every point matters, and that costs Arizona a point. So at the end of the day, I'm with you. They should absolutely do whatever it takes necessary to get the right call. Don't let it be too time consuming, but get to a point where you've got, where you have options to be able to review more plays for sure. But that just leads me to another question here in watching a couple of the Coyotes games as of late. They were off to a really good offensive start in the first couple of games. Now it's gone dry. Where's the offense been, or where can they get it from?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, if you watch the game last night, they're just not getting enough traffic in front of the net. And that's, I mean, how many coaches have you heard that from? Teams, I don't know why they get away from it. It's when it's such a mantra, it surprises me when teams go a few games without doing what they need to do in front of the net. It's a pretty simple process if you stick to it. But aside from that, I mean, some of their key players have to be producing for them. Phil Kessel had 4 goals early in the season, and that was a good sign. But they need it's sort of that middle core of players: Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, Christian Dvorak, even a guy like Lawson Krause, and then on the back end, Jacob Chychrun. They need to be getting offense from that group of guys. Those guys, as much as any, in my mind, are the ones who will decide the ceiling for this team this season.
And I was going to ask about Keller too, because as someone from the East Coast, and I remember when Keller was drafted by the Coyotes, I was excited because I thought that they were getting a dynamic player, and I just have not seen maybe the upside that he has. And maybe it's still there, but has he been limited at all in your sight, or what's been going on with Keller's situation?
Yeah, he got off to a good start this season. I really think that Clayton Keller cares and dedicates himself to the craft, but he gets away from the things that he needs to do. And he's one of the biggest defenders in my mind. Over the last few games, he just hasn't been going to the scoring areas. He's been a perimeter player, and Rick Tocchet keeps harping on that with him. But I guess you just have to keep reminding him that's where the goals are going to come from primarily. It's not going to happen like it happened in the lower levels. It just doesn't happen in the NHL. And if you're not willing to pay that sort of price, you're probably not going to succeed consistently in this league.
And just kind of moving forward now, I know that it's early. They're still very, very early in the season, only a couple points behind. The Coyotes are in last place right now in terms of points. I think everybody's played 7 games in the division. So if that continues, we know that the draft pick situation is not great. We know that they're going to try to do some things to recoup, but would it be too far to say that the Coyotes are going to look to do a fire sale by the trade deadline if they're way out of it too much? Or I guess just what is Bill Armstrong? How does he look at it, and how can he approach the deadline depending on where they're at?
Yeah, first off, he's told me that this season is going to be an evaluation season for him. He obviously, from being in the background that he's from in scouting and development, he's seen a lot of these players, but you don't get a chance to watch them up close every day. So he really is evaluating this entire roster right now. Having said that, look, if they're in a playoff spot when it comes to the deadline, it's going to be really hard to tell people, yeah, we're selling off all these veterans. At the same time, he's got to think about what's best for the future of this club. is this team really going to do anything when it gets in the playoffs, even if it does get in as the 4th seed in this division? I don't think so. You're facing Colorado or Vegas probably in the first round. That's not going to go well for this team. So it's going to be a really tough decision for them if they're in that situation. But if they're not in a playoff spot, I don't think there's any question that they're going to try and sell off a number of these veterans who are in the final year of their contract anyway. They already traded Derek Stepan for a 2nd-round pick, which I thought was a really good trade for them. But they've got 3 defensemen in Nicholas Chalmerson, Jason Demers, and Alex Goligoski, who will also be free agents at the end of the year. And then in goal, Antti Ranta will also be a free agent. So you could look to see what you can get for those guys, because as you mentioned earlier, they just don't have the draft capital, and they need that in order to jumpstart the rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to watch how they do that. Just got a couple more for you, Craig. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I guess outside of what we've talked about so far, like just maybe in the next little bit of stretch of games, we talked about the offense, but what other sorts of big questions do the Coyotes have to answer?
Well, I really want to see the development of I mentioned that core of players, but there are a couple other players that we haven't talked about. Barrett Hayton is as important to their future as any player on this roster. And to be frank, right now, and I know it's very early and this is a big jump for him, I really haven't seen much from him. I don't want to, sound the alarm bells this early for a 20-year-old kid who's playing his first real, stretch of NHL hockey. I know he played some games last year, but not enough. But I wonder, if they don't see some impact from him. Bill Armstrong's history says he's not afraid to overbake players in the AHL. Do they make the decision, even though they may not have the personnel to replace him in the lineup right now, do they make the decision for the long term of this club to put him in the AHL, let him play a full season, lots of minutes, all situations, and develop? That's one. Victor Soderstrom, of course, on defense is another one. High draft pick. I think he will end up in Tucson. So I think that could be a good situation for them. But then the last thing, they have a lot of money tied up in their blue line, Mark, and they're really not getting production from anybody other than Jacob Chikrin right now. Obviously, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is out of the lineup injured. He was off to a good start. But beyond that, Goligoski, Demers, Chalmerson, even Jordan Osterley, none of those guys are really contributing anything offensively right now. And that's a troubling sign for this club.
So real quick, any idea when we can expect Ekman-Larsson back in the lineup?
I think the timeline was about 3 weeks. So I'm not remembering the math right now, but I don't think it's going to be too much longer. Maybe another week beyond this weekend before he starts skating again.
Okay. And interesting question for you guys. I think the news officially broke kind of within the hour about the San Jose Sharks, and Glendale is going to be hosting a couple of pod games before the Sharks are allowed to go back on February the 13th. I just wonder your take about that situation where fans who live in Arizona can go and watch the Sharks play on February 1st and February 3rd. It's just, I couldn't imagine that kind of a start of the season for the Sharks being able to play at Gila River Arena like this.
Yeah, we've been waiting for that announcement for a while. I've been talking to the writers in San Jose, and it hasn't been official, but everyone's been expecting it because they didn't figure they'd be able to go back with Santa Clara County's restrictions the way they are. We've actually taken to calling them the Scottsdale Sharks around here. Figured they're going to be around for a while. So, hey, if fans want to go and watch the Sharks play, just want to watch NHL hockey, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to kind of get your mind off of what's going on in the world. You got to do what you got to do. The league's got to do what they got to do. And, hopefully for the Sharks, once February 13th gets there, they'll finally be able to get back home and, kind of go from there. Craig, this has been awesome. Fans, make sure you follow him at Craig S. Morgan on Twitter. He is the gold standard in my mind when it comes to anything going on with the Arizona Coyotes. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate you joining us.
Of course, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate you.
Right, man.
That was Craig Morgan joining us here. So I'm talking about everything going on in the desert, and man, there's always just something going on. He laid it out there beautifully with, kind of the lack of offense. They're not doing enough right now. The defensemen are not doing enough, but eventually Bill Armstrong is evaluating the situation, and then ultimately he's got to make some decisions about getting some draft capital back. So a lot of stuff going on down there. Make sure you follow him. And again, make sure you hit that like button on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. You will not miss any of our interviews. So let us transition back now to our Montreal Canadiens panel. So let us welcome back Ryan, Melissa, and Stephen. Hello again, panel.
Howdy.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, I think that might be a first where we went panel guest panel. So always adjusting here on the Hockey Writers Live.
Glad to be part of history.
There you go. Happy to be part of history. Best way to look at it. So Ryan, let's go to you for a minute now, because here you are one of the main Habs writers that we have, and this is your first opportunity to be able to participate in Zoom and cover them from that aspect. So just kind of talk about that experience for you, and just how has that helped you with your kind of coverage of the team?
It's been intriguing, very enlightening for a guy who grew up in Montreal, reading Red Fisher, Hall of Fame reporter Red Fisher, and idolizing him. It's kind of interesting just to see what reporters go through on a daily basis covering the Canadiens. And of course, times are different now than they were back then. Times are different than they were last season. But it's interesting just to get that mindset of how the players approach questions, how the questions are being asked, how the team decides who decides how the team decides who gets to ask a question. It's very, like I said, enlightening, and it's just from my personal perspective, it's helped me with my transcription capabilities, because I'm always typing away trying to get the quotes out on Twitter as fast as humanly possible, and I do tend to transcribe a lot in my day job, so it's been helpful in that sense as well. So I'm kind of grateful on a few fronts.
Yeah, fans, make sure you follow him too. He's on those calls. He's getting information in. It's a really good crew here. So Stephen, let's talk Josh Anderson for a minute. So
Sure.
Obviously the trade happened. Weren't quite sure what we weren't going to get from him coming off of injury, but right now he's really off to a nice start. And I feel like that fans are already warming up to him with Montreal. But just from your perspective in these first few games, what have you thought of him, and what has stood out to you?
Sure. As you said, I think there was some minor concerns with the shoulder injury he had and what kind of impact he would have, but all the positive aspects of that trade that were talked about, the fact that he's a very big man, he's 6'3", I think he's 230 pounds or close. He can skate. He's got some skill. Up to this point, I think he's come as advertised on those points. You saw that in the first game. He had he had 2 goals. There was that specific goal, this classic power forward move around John Tavares. He cut to the net, and Anderson maybe should have had that one, I think, but it went in, so they all count. Doesn't matter how they go in. But yeah, I think he's been very good in all aspects of the game. He's complimented Drouin and Suzuki, as Melissa sort of pointed out earlier. And yeah, points to be a good pickup for Bergevin. The only thing I would say at this point, I think he's been pretty quiet on the power play. I haven't really noticed him much. I don't know how long he'll stick around there. I would consider maybe taking him off the power play for right now, because I know he doesn't have a lot of experience in his time in Columbus on the power play, or his statistics on the power play in Columbus were very, very low. But yeah, I haven't noticed him on the power play at all. So that's the one area where I would consider maybe making a change. But other than that, I think he's been very good.
Well, the Columbus Blue Jackets power play has been more or less dead for 3 years. So that's a direct result of the stats are going to be low, because they just have not been able to figure it out at all. But has had some time. And when he plays, especially in the bumper role, he can be a force. I just think that if Montreal does figure out the right way to play him, I think you'll see results there. It's just, no matter what Columbus did on the power play, it was just not working out. So I expect bigger things eventually for Anderson in Montreal. But we had a blockbuster trade that didn't involve Montreal, but it certainly had a lot of rumbling. So obviously Pierre-Luc Dubois, and someone that Montreal was very interested in, and ended up going to the Winnipeg Jets. And then both Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic go back to Columbus. So Melissa, I'll start with you on this one. React to me, as we know that Montreal was extremely interested in bringing Dubois in, but it seemed very clear that they did not want to give Nick Suzuki up. I think maybe prior to the season, this could have happened, But
Yeah.
now I think Bergevin decided what he's got is good. So just react to me on Montreal not pulling the trigger.
Well, to be completely honest with you, I'm kind of glad it's over. Because I think it was getting to the point where it was like, with some of the trade proposals that I saw kind of go by, I was like, oh my goodness, like we need to move on to the next topic here. But I think honestly, like my reaction was relief, to be honest, not because I didn't want him on the team and not because I don't think he's a great player. And obviously the fit with Montreal is obvious, but I think just right now, it just wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the time. I don't see how we could have fit him in, even from a salary cap perspective. And yeah, as you mentioned, there was no way he was giving up Nick Suzuki or Alexander Romanov. And so right there, that pretty much kiboshed the whole thing. But I do believe that there's a good chance that someday, eventually down the road, he could be find himself in a Habs uniform. So
interesting.
We'll see.
So Ryan, are you glad? As I know you follow Bergevin quite a bit. Are you surprised that a trade didn't happen, or are you glad a trade didn't happen? Just where do you stand?
I'm not surprised. Going back to what Melissa said, the asking price would have been too much. I do recall that Bergevin, everyone knows Bergevin was interested in Dubois back to his draft year. I think the rumor had been that the Canadiens had a trade in place, or at least in principle, with the Oilers in place. And when Columbus nabbed Dubois, the player they wanted at third overall instead of Jesse Puljujarvi, that kind of kiboshed the trade, which I think, again, according to rumors, would have sent PK Subban back to the Oilers. But I think, again, Melissa hit the nail on the head. There was just no real way for this to happen, realistically speaking, because Nick Suzuki is, for all intents and purposes, acting, or at least he will be acting, as a number one center, in my view. Right now, he's more than capable second line center. And I think he's the heir apparent to that number one slot eventually. So it made no sense. He's producing, he's doing all the right things. The only real reason to give up, Suzuki or Kakaniemi for Dubois would be the last name. And I think Bergevin, after having traded Jonathan Drouin for Mikhail Sergachev a few years ago, has realized, I hope so anyway, that, a name isn't all that. And I think with, Romanov on the back end, they're on the road to recovering from that trade. And along with Drouin finding chemistry with Suzuki and Anderson, I think we can finally put that trade to rest. And thankfully, we don't have to worry about a Dubois one.
Stephen, where do you stand on all of this?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan and Melissa. I think the asking price was just too much for one of the two young centermen. I think maybe if Danault was somehow involved in the deal, I think maybe, but it didn't seem plausible from Columbus's perspective to make that deal. Danault was going to be a free agent this summer. It just didn't make a lot of sense. But as Ryan pointed to, the name aspect, yeah, I think it does show, though, that just the allure of a person like Dubois, like obviously is a very good player, but it shows kind of the hotbed of a market that Montreal really is. Like that's a perfect example of it, where there's this pressure to get a player that you just don't need, but it's that close to happening. It's an interesting scenario. But I'm personally glad that they decided to defer and not take him.
And Stephen, we'll stay with you on this one because I want to talk about the centers of attention. So obviously they didn't get Dubois, but they got a really good 1-2 punch, a young 1-2 punch in Suzuki and Kakaniemi. So just for those that really don't follow the Habs that close, how good have these two players been, and how big is their upside in your opinion?
So far, very good this season. I think Suzuki has a bigger upside. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. They're both sort of two-way centers, but I think Suzuki has a higher offensive upside. But yeah, I think he's maybe a little bit ahead. He's a year older than Kotkaniemi as well, but I think he's a little bit ahead in both offensive and defensive aspects of the game. In opening night, he made a great defensive play, 200-foot play, picking off a pass to Tavares in front of the net, and then turned it around all the way up the ice and got an offensive scoring chance. So I think his upside is very high. I think he's a number one center, Nick Suzuki. And I think Kotkaniemi would be a good number two center behind Suzuki in the future. I don't know if he could ever be a elite number one center, Kotkaniemi that is, on Montreal or another team. But I think he's a very good number two.
Ryan, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, for sure. There are obviously going to be parallels to Saku Koivu. Both he and Kotkaniemi being Finnish and centers. And Koivu was always miscast in the role of number one center on the Canadiens, in my opinion anyway. I think the general consensus is he was always going to be an above average number two. And I think that title or that role fits Kotkaniemi's skill set as well. I think one drawback of Kotkaniemi's game has been his skating, but he's been working on that, and I think that's evident in his game so far this season.
And Melissa, do you have anything to add?
No, they pretty much covered it all, but I think Suzuki is such a smart player as well. Like, for his age, to be able to read the play as he does at the speed of the NHL is so impressive. And he makes little plays and makes quick decisions that go, that, like, if you don't watch him every game, you wouldn't notice. But he really impressed, and I think both of them are improving on a daily basis. So that's all you can hope for. But I agree with both Ryan and Stephen about their upside. I think Suzuki has a bit more of an upside. So I hope that they are our number one and two centers for many, many years to come.
So about 10 minutes to 9 on the East here. Just want to reset things. This is the Hockey Writers Live. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and we are with our Montreal Canadiens panel here. We just got 3 more questions for them tonight. And Ryan, we'll go to you with this one. So what is going on from our outsider perspective with Victor Mete? Is he doomed to be out of Montreal, and maybe what has put him into the current situation he's in?
Long answer short, Alexander Romanov. He's the emergence of Alexander Romanov, and I say emergence lightly because he's just shown up and he's kind of been playing at such a high level so far. It's kind of pushed Mete to the fringes of the lineup, and it's kind of odd because Romanov is a left-handed defenseman like Mete, but they have Romanov playing on the right side for now, which is where Mete had been playing during the playoffs, even though it's very confusing. But again, Mete is kind of on the outs because they kept Brett Kulak in the mix to play on that third pairing. And maybe there weren't any takers for Brett Kulak's services. I don't know. I think from a competitive standpoint, it's made the most sense because Kulak has been very complimentary to Romanov, in my opinion. And I do believe Mete is a top 6 defenseman in this league at the very least. His offensive stats don't necessarily show it, at least over the course of his first 2 seasons when he had 0 goals. He did break through in a big way with 4 last season. But I think it's tough for me to say because in my mind, Mete is a logical solution to the Canadiens' need for a left-handed defenseman on the power play, should they choose that route. But then again, they have Romanov playing on the power play regularly. So I'd like to say that they'll keep Mete around, but he needs to develop, as I believe he's just 22 going on 23. He's still a young guy. And I feel as though if they don't trade him, his development is going to be stunted and it's going to be all for naught.
So Melissa, what has been your take on what you've seen of Victor Mete? Do you agree with Ryan's assessment that he can still be an effective top 6 defender, whether it's Montreal or somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's definitely an NHL defenseman, and should be playing, and on most other teams in the league would be playing every day. I just think, yeah, he's just a victim of falling down the depth chart right now, unfortunately. And but he has a lot, over 100 games of NHL experience. He plays, he obviously has a lot of attributes that are, again, like appealing. And the whole thing is, they won't put him on waivers because they know he's going to be claimed, no doubt about it, because there's already a ton of teams looking for a defenseman. So that's why his name is out there. But I think also, if I go back to the offseason, when they announced his contract extension, 700,000 1 year, like, to me, that was like the writing seems to be on the wall already, that he might not finish the season in Montreal, or if he does, he probably won't be back next year. It just didn't, it was sort of a 1 year. Okay, well, we'll give you this 1 year and then we'll see where things go. But to me, that contract signals that the writing's on the wall already for him.
And Stephen, has he already even played his last game as a Hab, or maybe can he get in, assuming injury, or just, what can we expect in your sight?
Yeah, I'm struggling. I mean, I do think that he is not quite as good as the 6 players that are in the lineup right now. I think most people would agree with that. I mean, that's why he's not in the lineup. I do think that he would get in if an injury took place. Other than that, I do see him having a hard time making any contribution at all. I do think they're going to keep him, though. I don't know if I don't know what the motive is. I don't know if they're trying to keep him and try and use him as like something to do with the expansion draft, or like make a target for that. Because clearly they don't value him as high as maybe he values himself, and other people value him. But yeah, because I think he is an NHL player, but I just don't know. I think barring injury, I don't think he gets much playing time. Or unless Romanov takes a real dip or someone is playing horrible, but then that's the only opportunity. Yeah.
If I can just add one thing, I don't mean to cut in. There had been talk heading into the last game whether or not they would play Mete at forward if Paul Byron wasn't healthy enough.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's also a possibility.
That's right.
Yeah. He can skate. I've watched him in London, so it's something. Be really curious to see where that one goes. So I just got one last question for you, and Melissa, we'll start with you. Just kind of in the next little segment of games here. They got the home opener coming up, and it's obviously going to be very exciting. But just maybe one or two of the biggest things that you're watching for when it comes to Montreal in this next little bit.
Yeah, I think it's just what I'm looking for is basically maintaining this high level of play that they've had. And of course, I think, like most Habs fans, I think we're all watching Romanov's every move at this point to see, just what he's going to do today. And I think I'm going to be paying attention really as well to the goaltending. I mean, Ryan alluded to at the beginning no one's really concerned about their statistics right now. But it's just to see, hopefully see Carey Price get into a bit more form here as we go, and hopefully they'll make do well on this long homestand. They tend to sometimes they often go on long road trips to start the season, and then they come home and they kind of they're not as inspired for whatever reason. So hopefully that trend doesn't continue.
Stephen, what are you going to be watching for?
Specifically this week, I am really interested to see how they match up against Calgary, because Calgary, I think, although right now I think they're 500 and they've looked a little off. They just dropped 2 to the Leafs. I think they do have a different look than what Montreal's seen so far. I know Edmonton and Vancouver have a lot of defensive struggles, and I don't really see that from Calgary. I think they play with a strong defensive structure. So and they're a little bit more physical, I think. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the Habs react to a team that's a little more physical and a little more defensively structured.
Yeah.
So before we get to Ryan on this one, sidebar question: who on the Montreal Canadiens will flip a puck at Matthew Tkachuk?
I personally would like to see Shea Weber do it, and Tkachuk think about doing something.
Yeah.
That would be fun for me.
Would that be in the form of a slap shot?
No, just the regular. Just see what Tkachuk does if Weber does decide to do anything, because I don't think Tkachuk has the stones to do anything. Looking at Shea Weber.
Yeah, I think I think he'll probably get an earful from Corey Perry too as well.
Gosh, that's for sure. So Ryan, we will give you the last word. What are you watching for in this next little stretch?
Maybe a good suntan brand too, because I'll be watching the red light all night long because of all the scoring. I'm excited about the offensive prowess of this team. I think, like I said, they can roll 4 lines, and they haven't let me down so far. I'm just gonna. I mean, I've always been high on this team from the start of from the point at which it was clear that what Bergevin was doing this offseason. I think that it was clear that he was willing to do what was necessary to compete to reach the second round at the very least. But I'm gonna reserve judgment until they've made their pass through all of the North Division teams. As Stephen alluded to, I don't want to count my chickens before they're hatched, before they've played Calgary, before they've played a full series against the Maple Leafs. I want to see how the Habs match up against every single team, because they've answered all of my questions so far, but I've still got a few left. I had Edmonton as the number 1 team heading into the season, but their goaltending, in my opinion, suspect. So before I declare the Canadiens as that number 1 overall team, or at least the favorite, I'd like to see other games, because there's just been 6 so far.
Excellent stuff as always, Ryan, Melissa, Stephen. We greatly appreciate the time that you've given us tonight, and just fans, make sure you follow them. Do a wonderful job covering the Montreal Canadiens here at the Hockey Writers. So all 3 of you, thank you very much for the time tonight. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, just kind of wrap it up here. We'll be back next week, next Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Guest will be to be determined. I know coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try and get a couple of bigger name guests on here. I know we're going to try and get some coverage from the National Women's Hockey League up in Lake Placid. I know we're going to try and get some folks on for that, so stay tuned. But again, just make sure you hit that like button on Facebook. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. You won't miss anything here. You can listen to them anytime that you want. And just hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Enjoy all the games. There's always something going on. And we'll be back here on the Hockey Writers Live next Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern. We'll see you then.